This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Discussions at the Roundtable. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Dr. Ellen Leggett to the show. Now, Dr. Leggett is the founder and president of Leggett Jury Research, a national trial consulting practice specializing in providing assistance in complex, high-stakes civil cases. She is well-published and has a strong background in academia as a professor of psychology at USC and holds both a master's and doctorate in human development and psychology and education from Harvard University. Dr. Leggett, thank you so much for joining me here today at the Roundtable.
Very glad to be here, Noah. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Let's jump into it. With a background in psychology, jury consulting may seem like a logical career path, but what many people might not know is that you are one of the founders of this area of inquiry. How did you first become interested in juries as a psychologist?
Yeah, that's a really fun question to answer because I was on the ground floor of a field that grew, and I've been doing this now for 35 years. So I'm very proud of how the field has grown and evolved over all this time. It kind of went from infancy to being a grown-up in the course of my career. But I love telling the origin story because I like to emphasize what role chance conversations can play in your life. I was a professor at one of the UC campuses out here in California, and I was teaching psychology. I was studying, in fact, the difference between expert and lay reasoning, studying the difference between, for example, what parents and teachers and children think intelligence or being smart means, what the difference is between doctors and patients in what they think health means, things like that. But I was on an airplane for summer vacation going back to Boston, and a flight from LA to Boston's kind of long. So I talked to my neighbor for the entire flight, who was a psychologist and had just joined a startup consulting firm of psychologists that were intending to pitch their services to corporate lawyers as a way to help communication in the courtroom to jurors. And I, in the middle of this conversation, said to myself, oh my gosh, there we have it again, experts and lay people. I really want to know more about this. And long story short, she gave me her business card. I called her, and I was the 20th person hired in this startup consulting firm that became the burgeoning and major firm in the country to get this industry launched at that time.
Wow. Well, that's a great jump. That's a great jumping off point for telling us what exactly is it that a jury consultant does. There's a lot of misinformation. People think that you've got a crystal ball back there or something. So how does it actually work?
Yeah, I'm glad to report we have no crystal balls, at least none that I'm willing to admit to. And there may be other consultants who will say, oh yeah, I consult my crystal ball all the time. Clearly a good portion of intuition is involved, but what do jury consultants do? At the beginning, we were trying to create the role and create a niche in an industry with trial lawyers that had been practicing in front of juries for years. And we were offering something new. What were we offering? We were offering the ability to see more clearly what the jury sees, what the jury thinks, what the jury feels, what the jury believes, and ultimately what the jury might decide. And that we were going to use the tools, mostly the research tools of psychology and social science to give credibility to what we report to you about what jurors think, feel, and decide. So we created the industry on the basis that social science has ways to look at what people might think as jurors about cases, and that we were going to inform lawyers so that they could better strategize about how to communicate to their audience in the trial, communicate more persuasively, in order to magnify what we consider to be just and right outcomes and decisions made by juries, so that they're actually able to use the information that they're presented in the courtroom, use it well, and make sound decisions, as opposed to not understanding, having what happens in the courtroom go over their head. They do something like toss a coin or rule on emotion only, and then everyone says, what a horrible, jury system we have. So we wanted to be both advocates for jurors and provide strategic information for trial lawyers that would help them communicate more effectively.
One of the things that you do is conduct studies on juror decision making. It's an important part of your practice. How do you go about designing these studies, given the vast breadth of types of cases? How do you capture the relevant data, and how do you parse that data?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We were very reliant, and I have throughout my career been very reliant on data. This is not armchair psychology for me. There are many types of jury consultants now in the country, 30 years later. But there are a group of us that are very wedded to quantitative research. And there are others who are more qualitative, and others who are more what I would call armchair, not quite crystal ball, but they opine without necessarily doing the kind of research that we're discussing. So we do mock trials, we do focus groups, we do community attitude surveys, and we're generally looking for a way to sample the population in which a particular trial will take place. And then we extrapolate from the trial facts the most essential arguments on both sides, present them in some format to the assembled members of the community, and get their reactions. What are they confused about? What do they want to still know? What makes no sense to them? Where do they have blinders on, that they have beliefs that just go contrary to what they're hearing in the trial? And those research projects they've evolved over time. Many consultants will do things with one methodology or another. That's one of the ways that we differentiate ourselves, I suppose, as service providers. But the case can dictate what kind of research the consultant will propose. And overall, we're trying to provide some research to help the trial team focus on data. Sometimes lots of people on the trial team have different opinions about what's going to sell to the jury, what's going to be the strongest part of their case. And by doing a project such as I've described, we can bring people together on the team, because we've asked we've asked sample jurors, and we've now got a way to perhaps build consensus on the team about what the strategy should be. That's when it's really exciting.
What makes someone a good candidate to be a sample juror? Is it somebody who's served on a jury before? Is it pretty much anyone, because we have juries of peers? How do you pick someone to be the data point?
The mock jurors are members of the community who would be, in the broadest sense, eligible to serve on any trial. In other words, they meet minimum qualifications of being over the age of 18, registered voters, or DMV has their name and number for car registration. But other than that, we're excusing anyone who has some kind of direct involvement with the litigants or the case, because everything that we do with mock jurors is intended to be highly confidential. It's attorney work product, after all. So we're trying to just give a sample of the diversity in that community. And we're often trying to match what the overall demographics are in the community. If it's a retired community, if it's people who are highly educated, we match the demographics in some way in order to say this group assembled here is a good sample of the distribution of people you might find in this trial venue.
It's almost like you're conducting your own mini voir dire after a fashion in choosing
We don't
potential.
actually. We
No.
interview everyone before they're seated as a mock juror, but we're not doing voir dire like in a court. They just have to pass these high-level demographic screenings. Yeah. And
Sure.
disqualify them. It's mostly disqualifying them if they've got some connection to the case. But other than that, we call it a general population recruit.
Do you typically work directly with experts, or do you do everything through the attorney, through the head attorney in a case? Who are you actually interacting with?
Yeah, good question. What role do I play with experts as you brought that up? And I think I should say that our goal is to find the best way to communicate the case and what messages are going to be most foundational, what themes are going to be most foundational for the story told to the jury about the case. But then we turn to who are the messengers that can deliver that story. And the lawyers can only do so much, right? We know they can give an opening statement, and then the judge says, oh, disregard anything they say. That's not evidence. So the messengers are extremely important, the witnesses. I'm someone, as a consultant, that puts a lot of emphasis on knowing who those messengers are going to be, because otherwise I'm just giving, kind of pie in the sky strategic recommendations to the clients. And over time in my own practice, I've become much more focused on the messengers and those witnesses, many of whom are the experts. So in the best situation, actually, we might test some of the witnesses in a mock trial well before trial and have an opportunity to get a reaction from the jurors, seeing fact witnesses or expert witnesses during the mock trial. That's something I advocate for in order to start, again, putting the message and the messenger both together.
Besides mock trials, what else can an expert witness expect when working with a jury consultant? Do you focus on demeanor and delivery? Or you've written before about how important it is to be concise and trustworthy. How can an expert witness improve the way that the jury perceives their trustworthiness, and how can they practice being concise?
You said a key word there, which is practice. And that is the message that I bring to the trial lawyers, that whether we have tested the experts in advance or not through a mock trial, I know that often the testimony of the expert will be pivotal. And I ask, do I have an opportunity to meet with the expert witness? Not all consultants will do that, and not all trial lawyers will say yes. So whether I get to ever meet the expert witness is purely in the hands of the client, the lawyers. And I'm glad to say that my clients, I persuade them that it would be a good thing very often, and I work with the experts to achieve maximum impact of their testimony. And you said, what does that involve? Well, what that involves, first of all, is my reaction as to their likability, credibility, and their ability to be persuasive. So I become the first juror. sitting in a session with the expert. I always call myself, I'm your first juror. And I have a doctorate from Harvard, as you mentioned. So if I don't understand what you're talking about, you've got no chance with the jury. I'm the best juror you're ever going to have. Try me. And I'm with the expert on, trying to get their content to be understood. I should say, it poses some challenges to work with experts outside of the presence of lawyers because of confidentiality and discoverability. And my practice is, and the professional advice of our professional organization, is that we work with the attorney present in the room. And that is my goal also, so that I'm joining in sessions that are planned by the attorney to meet with the expert. Often those sessions are a lot of talking at the expert. It's interesting when I'm in those meetings, sometimes I'm hearing the lawyers say, okay, we've got these documents we need to review, and this you said in your report, and there's a lot of one-way conversation happening with the expert. And my real goal is to get them in role play and actually practice that word again, because it's only through actually practicing that I can assess whether this is going to be too high level for the jury or not. So we're working on early on, we're working on just how comfortable is the expert in their role? Do they know what role they play in the trial strategy overall? And what has their experience been testifying before? Maybe a lot, maybe a little. How can I help the lawyer help the witness to feel comfortable with their role? What job do they need to do? Are they the one that's going to win the case, or are they one part of a team that's going to win the case? That's actually a pretty big deal. And then we get into my subjective opinion and anything we've learned from a mock trial test as to whether the style of the expert is going to be seen as credible and reliable by the jury. Mostly practicing is the way to make strides towards achieving the optimal testimony. And I can get more specific, but I'll stop there and see where else you want me to go.
Well, I've had a number of expert witnesses come on and talk about their interactions with juries. And the ones that feel they're best connecting with juries mention a lot of intangibles such as eye contact, body language, and sometimes when it's appropriate to make demonstrations close to the jury box, so that they're kind of interfacing with the jury after a fashion. Are those effective strategies in general?
Yeah, I would emphasize that the eye contact is one of the things I work on most with every witness, by the way, not just expert witnesses. If you think about how do we assess whether someone's telling the truth or not, we always say you got to look them straight in the eye and tell them the truth, right? We can't really tell if someone is truthful when we're seeing a profile sideways view, which would be the view the jury would have of a witness if the witness is looking at the questioner. They would be looking sideways, and the jury would have a great view of their cheek and the side of their face. So it's not natural to think about pivoting and talking to the jury. So that's a big hurdle that needs practice, and we'll work a lot on that. How to do that, how to make that seem natural, how to not make it seem that you're being rude to the lawyer who's asking the questions. And we do work on exactly how to position yourself in the seat, and how to look at the jury so that you're not seen as being someone who's staring at them, because they will be the ones to judge whether you're truthful or not. The demonstration up close to the jury, not every judge will permit that. There are often very tight courtrooms, and judges will not let witnesses or even lawyers get right up next to the jury box. I've seen that more times than not. And furthermore, if you get up close to the jury box, you're blocking others from seeing what you're doing. So there are a lot of rules about that. But the idea of it, to be active and on your feet, I wholeheartedly endorse. And I have often built in like a big chart that they're interacting with and able to show their expertise by being the teacher, the professor at the chalkboard or at the graphic in an interactive way. Writing things even on a butcher block paper in front of the jury can be very, very useful, because it does make students, it does make jurors feel like students, and that this is a teacher moment.
Let's talk about visual aids. What kinds of multimedia are most effective to jurors? Does the type of case that it is make a difference?
Really good question. And I'm a big believer in visual communication in the courtroom, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. It truly is. And it also has longer memory than words. So that's one of the ways in which I feel I'm very valuable as a member of the trial team working with the witnesses and experts in particular. I've usually asked to read their expert report. I've looked at what kind of charts they put into the expert report, and I inquire whether they have any graphics firm working on the case that can assist in making the charts and graphs even better. So my assessment is that they need a lot of charts, graphs, visual demonstratives in any way possible, in any media possible. I have worked with experts where we've made complete videos for them. One expert witness was an economist testifying about the worldwide salmon market and supply and demand of salmon. And we actually sent this expert with a crew of videographers to Japan to film the Japan fish markets to show what consumers are seeing. This was my idea, because you talk about supply and demand and eyes glaze over. But given that we were talking about Japan as the largest importer of salmon in the world, what is the consumer faced with there? Created that video, which she testified to in trial, and it was pivotal. Whereas before, the expert just talking about supply and demand, we were not getting the jury traction that we needed on a big antitrust case where market changes and things were very important.
That's absolutely fascinating. I've talked to a lot of expert witnesses who have talked about the way that they communicate their very technical field to laypersons. But one thing that's not talked about a lot is how do you talk to people about things that aren't necessarily technical, but can be quite boring and keep them interested. So, if you're talking to some, actuary or somebody about fish markets somewhere, besides visual aids, what are some of the techniques that experts can use to make their expertise more accessible and more interesting to jurors?
Yeah, it comes down to, as a professor, I think it's the same as what makes a good professor in the classroom, right? That you've got good examples, that you may find that there is a particular theme or refrain, simple phrase that you can use that anchors everybody and you can keep coming back to it. But that is one of the goals, is how to keep the information coming in a way that is succinct, is another important way to make sure that jurors understand it, is boil it down to the essence and be able to describe it in a way that I say, can your grandmother understand this? If not, we got to keep working. So the boiling it down to the essence and knowing what that is, which is important for the jury, is important, even though the structure and all the other evidence needs to be in for the record. We need to know what it is that's most important for the jury and deliver that kernel multiple times, repetition, succinctly, in a memorable way, with most likely a demonstrative or even better, an exhibit that will go into the jury room. A demonstrative won't. So working to get an exhibit that can go in the jury room is really important as well.
You consult in all, well, at least most litigation areas ranging from negligence to antitrust. Are there differences in your approach to different practice areas?
I would say no. In fact, my ability to be the eyes and ears of the jury is my main goal in any kind of case. And some cases are more complex than others. And nonetheless, the techniques that I use are very similar.
What makes an expert great to work with? What are what what are the things that you're looking for as a consultant that just like, even if they're not great at first, what makes them a great canvas?
I think uh, a combination of healthy ego, but willingness to learn. An expert is an expert. The jury wants to see them as having expertise that is special. Therefore, having the confidence in what they're saying and the ability to own it with, I say, healthy amount of ego as opposed to egotistic and overly confident is the variable there, right? We want enough expertise that jurors will trust, but not an arrogant expertise that turns jurors off. So that's number one. Number two, willingness to learn. And I say that because communicating to a jury is not something you learn how to do once. It evolves over time, and every jury is different because of the case facts being different, the trial lawyers being different, the venue being different. So if you're an expert that's going to multiple states even to testify, you need to get with the local scene, and the jury consultant is probably the best expert on that. So the ability to learn is a flexibility to read the room, so to speak, and know what environment you're in when you go to testify. And I think those two things combined would make an expert a joy to work with. A good sense of humor, too. Not taking themselves to perfectionist standards, holding themselves to perfectionist standards, but holding them to a standard that is, this is going to work. You are confident, they will see you as credible, and you're delivering an important message that the case needs.
In smaller actions where the expert witnesses don't necessarily have the opportunity to work with a jury consultant, how can they best prepare themselves? Are there resources out there that they can use to practice and better work on their expert witnessing ability vis-a-vis juries?
Certainly a lot has been written to, give tips and tricks to experts and witnesses alike. But I think I alluded at the beginning to what I think is most important, which is practice. So some lawyers tell me they don't want to work too much with the witness because the witness will be stale. I kind of think the opposite. I think practicing is key to feeling comfortable. So if the witness can even practice at home with their wives, which is of course what they've done forever before there were jury consultants, that even their spouse, their partner, their siblings, their friends, an audience is what I think is important. and getting any feedback from them, not about content, but about delivery, and that can help. But I do think it's the trial team and a jury consultant who can best focus on what is actually needed for the case. One thing I think experts can do and should do is ask for more practice with the trial team. Often they have told me that they've had maybe 1 or 2 meetings before testifying, and that there has not been enough actual role playing in role for them to feel like they've actually practiced. So the practice isn't a meeting where there's a discussion after every question. Practice is be in role and let it roll and have the attorney there asking the questions. And I think that any expert can ask for more time doing that in order to make them feel as comfortable as possible.
Do you have any last advice for expert witnesses or attorneys that find themselves in jury trials?
I would love to empower experts to ask about the services of a trial consultant and on any case that they're working. They should know, is there a trial consultant? Is there a jury expert? Has a mock trial been done? Is there, if there hasn't been a mock trial yet and there is a consultant, is there a way that my testimony can be included in the mock so I can get some feedback? And finally, if there is a jury consultant, to ask, is it going to be possible for me to have the jury consultant sit in on one of our sessions so that I can get the benefit of the jury consultant's insights about communicating to the jury? I would love for experts to feel empowered to ask those questions, because in the long run, it helps everyone be on the same page, and not the jury consultant over here talking only to the lawyers, divorced from the opportunity to work with the messengers who are so important for the jury at trial.
Sage advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Leggett, for joining me here today.
You're very welcome.
And thank you to our listeners for joining me for another discussion at the roundtable. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening apps.